Welcome to Watchtower History.
Some of this chiropractic quack cures was questioned in some of these early Golden Age articles because some of them were supposedly involved in psychic or demonology or hypnotism or spiritism. And Watchtower was against those kind of things. And they have to actually write an article saying, no, those are, divergent chiropractors. Most chiropractic is not into this kind of thing, and this is okay. But just the very fact that they have to say it, that was on people's minds, this kind of, again, that conspiratorial thinking, that they have to respond to that conspiratorial thinking in the Golden Age.
It's like his comment when he's defending himself. This is not a book-selling scheme.
Yeah.
Because everybody's questioning, you're selling a lot of books. They're printed for free. Their labor is free. So it's sort of the same thing.
Another weird idea that Watchtower had is that they should be clean shaven, that beards are not proper. And some of the reasons given for that is related to some of the anti-Semitism as well. Now, there's that story from Germany with Balzery, and we discussed him in both our Stand Firm and our Back Down discussions. He's the one who, when they needed a new press in Germany, and Rutherford was there, he said, I'll get you a new press as long as you shave your beard. And, of course, he shaved his beard, and when Balzery returned, people didn't recognize him, and they were asking, who are you? So it caused a little bit of confusion at first, but Rutherford didn't want beards. Why didn't he want beards? What was some of the reasoning used for no beards in the Watchtower and Golden Age publications?
Multiple. One of the ones, Rutherford had a problem with people loving Charles Russell and wanting to be like him. Even though he's emulating Bryant, he didn't want anyone emulating Russell. He wanted them to emulate him. So he created this new doctrine, I'll call it, of creature worship. Because I've only heard that through any religion that I've ever heard it through is Watchtower. And he developed the doctrine of creature worship, being anything prior to him is worshiping somebody, a creature, an entity. Whereas he changed it to him, albeit an organization that he completely took over. And a lot of that...
So they replaced one creature worship with another, is what you're saying.
But beards were, at the time of Russell, a staple, a common thing. So it wasn't people were worshiping him like Rutherford called it worship, because they were focused, as another opinion. Wait, Russell wasn't talking like this, and he had to divert. Oh, you got the beard, do this, do that, like he did with everything else. And this Balzerat must have had some, again, belief of attachment to the organization, because he listened.
Yeah, loyalty.
He didn't refuse. He listened, obeyed, and once again, Rutherford got a whole new way of thinking set into his organization.
And if you look at the culture in Germany at the time, the culture was beards. To be clean shaven was a sign of emasculation, a sign of femininity. A beard was a status symbol in Germany. And, if we follow Balzerit's story after the Holocaust, after the Nazi period, after the Third Reich, Balzerit ended up leaving the Watchtower Society and joined one of the splinter group. But Another influence on Rutherford and no beards was
Which we
his,
were going to, yes.
yeah,
I just wanted to
which is
bring
his
out that
mentor,
before you
his
brought out
mentor,
this part.
William Jennings Bryan. William Jennings Bryan, who he dressed like, who he emulated, who he talked about in every newspaper interview that he had, that he campaigned for Bryan. Even Time Magazine noted that he dressed like Bryan, decades later. Bryan had trouble growing a beard. It wasn't the same color as the rest of his hair.
In Charles Morrow Wilson's The Commoner, William Jennings Bryan, he talks about Bryan and beards. He says, in what may have been an additional effort at conformity, Will made a first bold try at growing a beard. More than half the student body at Illinois College were wearing beards. All the rest of the senior class were at least mustached. The first Bryan beard turned out to be rather remarkable, at least in color. The curly stubble was a pale, fawn-like brown, by inexplicable contrast with the wearer's cold black hair. After more weeks of growth, the beard assumed a cast that Mamie described as buffalo brown. The senior student resumed shaving, and a little later on, it mentions the contrast of Bryan with the other members of his student body. The Galesburg Oratorical Meet assembled with entries from 9 Midwestern colleges. The judges and auditorium were ready and waiting, so was a photographer. Separately and in a stiffly posed group, the contestants stood for their pictures. 8 of the contestants were young men. 3 of them wore full beards, 4 were mustached. Only Bryan, far and away the most handsome, was clean-shaven. In posing for the group picture, he stood rigidly, his right hand hidden in the front folds of a tight-fitting Prince Albert or common style morning coat. All the other male contestants were similarly garbed. One gathers that the suits were rented, probably by the host college. None fitted particularly well.
Rutherford, emulating his mentor, Bryan, who remained clean shaven. There's also a potential influence there as well. McFadden and Bryan had similar interests in these natural homeopathic type of remedies. And remember again, the 2 men lectured at the same chiropractic conferences on several occasions. McFadden's opposition to the beard also seems to partially stem from possibly anti-Semitic ideas.
Now we'll get more into the anti-Semitic background to McFadden and some of the other chiropractors in the next part of this discussion. Now, William Jennings Bryan and Barara McFadden were linked together through various chiropractic conferences that they spent. In Augustus Dye's book, The Evolution of Chiropractic, he says that at these gatherings there were lectures by men well known in public life, such as Clarence Darrow, the noted criminal lawyer who was involved in the Scopes monkey trial, along with William Jennings Bryan as well. Albert Hubbard, the noted publicist and orator, a man known throughout the world for his writings, and his most prominent writing, The Message to Garcia. The Honorable William Jennings Bryan, several times Democratic candidate for President of the United States, Secretary of State in the Wilson Cabinet, and well known for his oratorial ability. Bernard McFadden, the physical culture exponent and publicist. And a little further down, these annual meetings of the UCA and the annual homecomings became more of an entertainment feature than a meeting for discussion of ways and means to further the interests of chiropractic. There are some odd connections between Bernard McFadden and William Jennings Bryan. One of them is parody advertisement in The New Yorker, where William Jennings Bryan's head is placed on top of McFadden's body. McFadden was a well-known chiropractic physical culture publisher who published sensational periodicals and magazines of the time period, which were quite similar to the National Enquirer of our day. Now, McFadden was known for some of his anti-Semitic views, and Watchtower is quoting McFadden in his publication in various of their Watchtower publications. McFadden is mentioning beards
in the sense that the Jews were non-hygienic because of their custom of wearing beards. And that's the same sort of logic that the Nazis were using in the Third Reich regarding the Jews. And that's why you would see in a lot of the old footage that the Nazis would grab their beards and start cutting them off as part of their fight against the Jews, as their anti-Semitic attacks against the Jews. Yeah.
Not too long ago, similar along this subject, there was the Amish people brought another group of people as a hate crime. They grabbed the Amish and they shaved their beards, and the Amish went and sued, literally used the court system and sued for that. And again, it falls under a hate crime when you do something that's specific to a race or religion or something like that. So again, even back in Bible times, there were two spies who King David sent out, and they were captured, shaved their beards, and David let them go off until their beards grew because they didn't want to be humiliated. It was a real sign of humiliation. So Rutherford performed the same tactic on the Germans, you know. So
now remember, Bryan, Rutherford, the Populist Party, McFadden, they were influenced partially by anti-Semitic conspiracy theories for their anti-vaccination and other medical quackery ideas.
On December 15th, the governing body posted another update. And in this one, there was a question about beards. Because up until now, they've been allowed beard fractions in the Jehovah's Witness organization. After Anthony Morris was no longer a governing body member, there's been a lot of new changes. There's been several positions where the governing body has been softening their position. The new ones recently have been not only the Great Tribulation, which feeds into Armageddon, the separation of the sheep and goats timing changing ever so slightly, who will survive Armageddon being much more open, letting Jehovah decide. And now beards is the new one.
How did beards get wrapped up in the salvation of mankind? Well, I mean, I remember, again, being a boy, and I remember when they used to have the dramas, people my grandmother knew and other would be in the dramas because they were all the spiritual super heavyweights and all that. And I remember they got for the drama, they got this get out of jail card where you could grow a beard because you were going to play Moses or Joshua or whoever in the drama. And I just remember even back then as a boy thinking, you're a grown man. They're tell you when you can grow it, and then they're going to tell you when you have to shave it off. And I remember one of the guys, he was resistant to shaving it. He liked it. His wife thought he looked handsome in it, and he did. He looked good in a beard. Ironically, with a mustache, I look like El Chapo or some Mexican drug lord. But when I grow a beard, it makes me entirely look different. So he wanted to do that. His wife wanted, but I remember the pressure on him. And like they talk, the whole congregation's talking, they're ever, and then the elders got to get involved because he was an elder, and you're causing disunity, and all that. It cracks me up how important this is. And when you go back to where it really started, when two of the origins of it all was Rutherford, you got to admit the jealousy with people wanting to be like Russell. No, we got to get rid of that creature, become my creature, me, who I take after Brian, William Jennings Bryan. So
who we also said could not grow a beard well at all either. And so was always clean shaven at a time when the style was to wear a beard.
Mhm.
And Rutherford following what Brian had done, wearing that bow tie and dressing like him. One of the possibilities is that he even emulated the shaving early on from just mimicking his mentor.
Now, I took time to watch that Stephen Lett give that presentation, and I can't help but notice how the way they portrayed it was like a rebelliousness of the '60s that caused it. Did you watch it yet, Jeff?
Yeah, I watched it. Yeah.
And you remember that part with the rebelliousness from the '60s, when, if you look at it, Rutherford, even before 1919, when the style after the war that they said caused clean shavenness, Rutherford was clean shaven before the war. So that whole phase did not start out of like they want to make it claim to be. The war changed appearance with clean shaven, and then it really became an issue of rebelliousness when people started going beards to disrespect. They just carried it on, not even know why they started it in the first place.
Well, remember, there's this connection, possible connection with Brian and wanting to emulate him. There's also this connection with the creature worship with the organization and Russell and wanting to get away from that. But instead of moving away from that creature worship, as you said, he created his own creature worship. He wanted to be the one in charge. He wanted to be the one used of Jehovah. He believed all of these things. He created this new organization out of these anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and also out of these quack medical positions that they were taking. And as we saw, even beards, McFadden mentioned even beards being something that Jews wore, and he did not mention it in a favorable light.
And what year did McFadden say that?
And this was in the 1920s, exactly the same time when.
The same time. So now they were justifying it afterward, after the fact. They were doing it before, so it's not like a new change and all that. Now they're just using means and tying in their anti-Semitism with even why. See, look, we don't have that. We're not part of it. I mean, it's almost comical how that one kind of fell into their lap.
Yeah, at a time of rising anti-Semitism, they were falling right in line with the politics of the time period and the fads of what was going on. Instead of being separate and following scriptures, they were following conspiracies and made the foundation of their organization conspiracies that are based on literal forgeries, as we mentioned already. The organization hangs on every single word of the governing body.
On behalf of the governing body, if we've loyally supported the organization's direction over the years, do we have any scriptural reason to regret our course? The governing body has concluded the governing body does not have an issue. Why is the governing body providing this direction at this time? Jehovah values our loyal service. He also appreciates our humble willingness to be obedient and submissive to the direction we receive from God's organization. The governing body, the faithful slave, Jehovah's organization. The governing body today is striving to promote unity. End of the announcement from the governing body.
There have been many questions coming into the organization about whether or not wearing beards is proper. It's just shocking to me that they have to spend so much time creating a whole video just on that one subject alone.
What I was and you said it before. It took me a little bit while to figure it out. Not figure it out, but I don't remember it being as strong. The way everything is, they keep talking about the governing body has come to it. The governing body, they're mentioning that a lot. It's not like the Bible says, we're talking about times. They're like putting it, just listen to us. And it's a lot of psychology in there. Even at the end of one of the announcements, he says the governing body, an announcement from the governing body. Why are they constantly remembering that? And then they're talking about why follow the governing body's direction. They got to remind you constantly of that all the time. And what got me, what I couldn't, he tried to make it seem like it was times change, styles, different things everybody's asking. And now that it's common, it's not like the hippies anymore. Here's my question with this. Tattoos. Everybody's got a tattoo today. Whether you could afford it or not, they get a tattoo. They put it on their credit card. They've got it all up their arms, called the sleeve. They got things. They're fit. Okay, is that acceptable now too? Because that is an acceptable thing. Now, granted, the Bible does say, if I remember correctly, by word tattoo in some translations, not to ink yourself like the Philistines and all those did. So they got a leg on that. But there's a lot of stuff that's common. Nose rings, men wearing earrings. So why is beards? And I'm not trying to pick, just grasp at straws here, but why does it beards? Okay, but not, I want to wear an earring.
Well, he talks about how Jehovah loves variety.
I'll have a different earring every meeting.
And yet how far does that variety go?
Mm-hmm.
How far does unity go?
But does that mean that all of Jehovah's Witnesses make the same choices? Should we wear a uniform or adopt a single form of appropriate dress and grooming? Of course not. There are well over 8 million of Jehovah's Witnesses worldwide, and we have a wide range of cultures. Jehovah has drawn these millions of people, and he loves variety. We trust that these comments will help us to remain on guard against anything that might cause division among Jehovah's people.
They've always pushed unity, well, at least since loyalty and unity, at least since Rutherford's period, very, very strongly. Because Rutherford was afraid of losing his members, of the organization fragmenting, which it did after his coup.
And he had his only printers in the printing press dependent on him sign a loyalty oath in 1917. Or else, if they didn't, they would have been out on the street. So loyalty has been since 1916 at the death to when he took it over, has always been a prime focus. And it's like a leader. I can't help but think of The Godfather. If they don't respect me, they'll fear me. And Rutherford was along the lines of The Godfather. Okay, you don't want to do it because you like me like Russell. You'll do it because you'll fear me. And he even went as far as creating a fear of being null and void of eternal salvation unless you join his specific organization. So that carried on, that whole unity thing.
Under the Russell period, it was very, very different, as we had in our disfellowship discussion, where they would even have various meetings to allow people to present another point of view. You have another point of view, let's create a special meeting and let you present that point of view. But when it became unity at all costs, rather than unity in the Spirit or unity in Christ, but unity at all costs, where no freedom of thought was allowed and everyone had to have the same opinion. If only one person is doing the thinking, then is there really any thought at all?
I couldn't help, along the lines of that, what we're saying, I couldn't help where Stephen Lett mentioned that the governing body met over the discussion of circumcision. And he says the governing body met. And I couldn't help but go to that scripture where it came from in Acts 15. There is no mention of a governing body whatsoever. And in fact, it goes, and I'll get to that at the end when I go this. It talks about the apostles from wanted to meet with the apostles in Jerusalem. Okay, now let's put it in perspective. That's where Jesus started his ministry. That's where a majority of them at the time, because that's where it started, were. And also Jesus handpicked these people. So putting that in there, they got together to consider the matter. But I like how it says when they were all said and done, that it pleased the apostle when they voted it in. It pleased the apostles and the elders with the whole church. Okay, did the governing body say we could grow beards now because the governing body and the whole church agrees to all this? And the way they go about the way they do their comparison with them and the governing body, it's almost as like they're not almost, they're making apostles of themselves. And you go back to that apostolic, how do you pronounce it?
Apostolic authority, yeah.
Apostolic succession is the word I was looking for. Apostolic succession is really what, in essence, they're claiming indirectly.
And remember, when Acts 15 is talking about this, what was the custom of the time and how the congregations were run? When there was a disfellowshipping offense, the entire congregation was involved. The entire congregation voted on the matter.
We discussed that in our disfellowshipping series that we did.
And so it sounds like what you're saying here in Acts 15, that is a very similar situation where the entire church is agreeing. They're all contemplating the matter as well. And we know this from early church history because Mosheim's Ecclesiastical History, which I have another one of those old history books on the shelf, mentions how the congregations would raise their hand and make a vote on various matters. This was a bottom-up type of thing in the early church. When it became a top-down type of organization, then you had Jehovah's Witnesses in the governing body, and there was total and complete control. But the early church was quite different. The assembled people therefore elected their own rulers and teachers, or received without constraint those recommended to them. They also by their suffrages rejected or confirmed the laws which were proposed by their rulers in their assemblies. They excluded profligate and lapsed brethren and restored them. They decided the controversies and disputes which arose. They heard and determined the causes of presbyters and deacons. In a word, the people did everything which belongs to those in whom the supreme power of the community is vested.
In touching base on what you said about the whole congregation voted, the whole church voted for a disfellowshipping or something important like that, that outright indicates that even Peter could not decide, I'm disfellowshipping that person. Even Peter did not, when you think about that, putting it in perspective, the apostle Peter himself, who they went to go see and talk to, did not have the authority to say someone was disfellowshipped. And he didn't even appoint a group of men who then, okay, me and the elders will decide if you're disfellowshipped. It was so transparent. The whole congregation was involved. Now,
yeah, and as it should be, because
as it should be, but that could be very embarrassing while your business is taken to a congregation. There are pros and cons, but maybe it kept you out of trouble.
But maybe a good public shaming might be something needed in order to keep
or
yourself
fear
under control, right? Yeah.
public shame. Especially today when they got videos and recordings and all that, it can really get nasty. But again, back to that thought. I mean, literally, the Apostle Peter, the rock of the church, did not have the authority that the governing body gave to themselves. And something that we touch base and go back again, Russell put in his will for his ministry to continue under the guidelines that one man cannot insert his ideas. Look what happened, not following that. Look what happened, not following the pattern in Acts.
As the governing body is showing the history of beards in our culture over the past century, they're not talking about the history of the beards in the organization. They neglect to mention Rutherford ordering Belzerit in Germany to shave his beard just so that he could get the new printing press he wanted. Over the past few years, I've been hopping into the Zoom meeting of one of the local congregations here, just so I can keep contact and get the new literature as it comes out. And I've been neglecting to do that for several months now, but when I was popping in, I was very shocked to see multiple members of the congregation sporting beards.
Okay, now let's stop and think about that. Okay, the timing of this. Is it the governing body giving it their blessing because it's out of their control? They're already doing it. They have no control. So rather than look like you don't control it, you bless it.
That's a possibility. And why, perhaps? Because if you were sporting a beard, you couldn't have a role of a ministerial servant or the role of an elder. You were looked down upon by the congregation. And they're having trouble. They're having difficulty filling those positions now. So maybe they're trying to loosen it up a little bit to try and open that up. That could be another possibility.
So I guess a couple of years ago, they had to wear their burqas where just their eyes show and hide their beards and whatnot. Their reasonings for things. And again, it's an opinion. If you're losing control, act like you're blessing and that's what you wanted anyway. But once again, they're bringing up something. When you make an issue of something and then look important solving it, that's the type of people you're attracting. Okay, I looked at even back as a boy, I'm like, why are you shaving your beard off and growing it when they tell you? Aren't you an adult? You know, I wouldn't let anybody tell, unless it was like a job requirement where you like in the medical industry, you have to wear, a mask and you can't have hair or else you can, your mask on, and unless there's a real reason for it. I don't see how they got so far out of it. Even a well-groomed beard was good. The hippies that they're pointing an example to, they weren't trimmed beards. They were just, grown long hair and everything. So a lot of the reasoning behind it doesn't sit well with me anyway.
And I've also been wondering and considering, how far are these changes, or how fast are these changes going to follow?
Well, that question already answered by Stephen Lett, that the chariot of Jehovah is moving very fast. He said that in the video.
All of us need to remember that the earthly part of Jehovah's organization is always striving to reflect the heavenly part, to keep up with it, as it were. Remember how fast the chariot in Ezekiel's vision moved? Like flashes of lightning. Any who seek to run ahead of that chariot, trying to force change prematurely, or who lag behind, hesitating to support changes that have come from the faithful slave, are not keeping pace with Jehovah's organization.
All right.
See, if I
So,
were a witness today, I would grow half a beard on one side of my face and then be clean shaven on the other, just to stir it
like
up.
like that Star Trek character in those episodes where you had half
Yeah,
white and half black, and the other one
and
was
then
completely
turn
reversed.
this way. Then you could get on the platform, have an argument with yourself, discussing what they're saying.
So, it would be nice to see them loosening up, because maybe, it would be nice to see that, because they are losing a lot of people because of the strict positions that they've held for so long. How far can the Jehovah's Witness liberty go? How far will the governing body let it go? How fast are they going to move on their liberty?
Well, then you got the question there too. Okay, are you becoming more like the people you're criticizing in mainstream Christendom, that you give in to keep your members? Because you say whatever you want, they lose 1075 a month for everyone they get rid of. So now are they more concerned? Okay, we could fill another 100,000 people and make 1075 off each one. I mean, I think you got to look at it, Jeff. I think in the past 5 years, especially 5 years, they've totally lost focus of what their mission was, even from what they started. And the fact that some of these new light things that they're coming up with, the Armageddon and all that, you're talking 100 years, you and saying this, and wham, all in one. And everybody who believed all that and started it in the governing body, they're all dead. So you don't believe what you were taught. So that there's so many ways to tear this apart.
And they've become so much more like who they called Christendom, with their music, with their televangelism, their movies. They're doing exactly what they criticized Christendom of the last several years.
And they've even made statements in the past, before they started making all the movies and all that, that we're preaching or door to door. That's how we do. We'll never get into they used to criticize all the televangelists. They used to criticize all the Jesus movies, the little kid movies. I remember them criticizing that. You remember that old clay puppet anime train thing, David and Goliath?
Oh, I remembered that one. Yeah.
They used to
I
say,
used to watch that when I was little.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, if you were a witness kid, you couldn't. Yeah, I watched it, which was comical. That's why I said maybe I was spared from a lot of things that a lot of the youth were. I got to watch that. My grandmother loved the Ten Commandments. She used to listen to a guy, Garner Ted Armstrong.
Oh yeah, the plain truth movement.
She used to like to listen, and I used to kid her, call her a pagan. You're listening, he says things about the Bible. That's what I'm listening to. Yes, Grandma, that's what you're really listening to. Unless he's telling you to do something like don't think about the future, buy a house, get an education, then maybe you should stop listening to them. And even back to the governing body ruling the roost, he made a comment. And again, it's like they're thinking ahead. Yeah, here's what they're going to say or think because of what we said for 100 years. He uses these examples about don't regret serving and following in submission for years to the advice and what was. Look at it like a joy and all that. So even they're in their own little world, they're acknowledging how their actions are creating reactions from their members. And they predicted what they were going to say. And then he even predicted about those who saying, well, wait, I don't agree with beards. The governing body was right. Why should we change it? So I think they're realizing, and again, I'm going to blame it on the internet.
Yeah.
It's people are fact checking whether they want them to or not and coming to their own conclusion. It never makes me forget. There was a song when MTV came out, and it was a very popular song. And it was talking about how through MTV, all who the new musicians and stars and pop stars were versus the old way where they had to record and tour and do all that. And the line in the song was, video killed the radio star. If you remember that song,
Yeah.
Video Killed the Radio Star. It was a very popular MTV hit. And that's so true when you compare it with this.
Well, the more they relax and give liberty, the more they're going to lose people. So I don't think they're going to go too far,
Mm-hmm.
but it would be very, very nice. But I think if they don't go far enough,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to keep losing in droves as they have been as well. They know their statistics. They see a trend. And how are they going to stem off that trend?